Welcome to the Robcast. This is a show about Oakville, the people that live, work, and do business here. I'm honored to have our guest here. This is the former mayor of Oakville, Ann Mulvale.
It's the Robcast Podcast. He's with you for the next hour or 20 minutes. Who knows? Let's see how it goes.
The Robcast is brought to you by Oakville's own Fisher Private Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities and Angus Fraser Private Banker with RBC Private Banking Oakville.
Here he is. It's Rob Raham.
Ann, thank you so much for being here today.
No, it's my pleasure. It's exciting. It's enjoying your technician and your location, and I love Oakville.
Great start. Let's pull it right to the back. So you were born in the United Kingdom. Tell me about what life was like growing up there and kind of what led to the decision to immigrate to Canada and specifically Oakville.
Sure. Well, I was born in 1949, so post-Second World War. England was in, and Great Britain in general, a great depression, really. They had won the war with their allies and great support from Canadians, Australians, Americans eventually, when they decided which way it was going. But we were economically underprivileged. My parents never owned a car. My father had been in community college when the war hit. He and his 4 brothers enlisted the next day after Germany invaded Poland, so he lacked formal education. His 5th brother joined as soon as he was old enough, so it was a great mobilized family. My mother was brilliant. It's where my world-renowned scientist brother and I get what intellect we have from. My dad had street smarts, but he was not a book-learned man. But he did tell me, and you'll like this, as a real estate, you can pay rent for 50 years, Anne, or you can pay a mortgage for 20, 25. So I've
Great
always
advice.
That's good advice, good advice. So my mom, although brilliant, had mental illness, so we were farmed out to family members, and eventually the family members got tired of taking us in, and we were fostered for a period of our lives. And then my dad got us back because, as happened in England in those days, a 16, 17-year-old cousin got, in the vernacular, knocked up, and so her father threw her out. She came to live with us. She didn't really care for us or anything, but she qualified so that we could come out of foster care.
Okay.
So we appreciated that.
Wow.
And then I went to, you were graded at 11 with the famous, 11 plus examination. I passed the first part, failed the second part, so I was streamed into secondary school, but I kept topping the class in the top 3 of my class. So they knew I had potential. So I finished my education in night school, qualified for nursing school, and to be one of the first female police cadets.
Wow.
But I met this man, and it was an exciting journey, and we decided he was 25, 26, couldn't advance because we had wage and price controls, had a review, and it said, essentially, we pay you as a plodder, not as a thinker. And he said, but the guy I supervise makes more money. And they said, well, of course, he's got a wife and kids. And he said, when will I ever have a wife and kids? So he came storming round to my house and said, are we getting married before or after we go to Canada?
Is that
because
right?
I had been to Canada for Expo.
Okay.
As a tourist. I had 3 jobs, 2 night school classes, and bought a ticket and came to Canada for Expo.
Wow.
So I knew a little bit about Canada.
Yeah, and was that part of that visit was kind of influence you to say this is where we want to be?
Yeah, well, when I went back, I met the man I married. It was the love of my life, and we had 25 incredible years for which I remain grateful. Had a couple of kids, and so we came to Canada. Test and development engineer, we went to work. He had a project with Chrysler on a government's military amphibious project. So that was hilarious.
Interesting, yeah.
Because he didn't swim.
Right.
And I thought the first few months, I'm going to be widowed in the first few months because he's out there in the Detroit River.
Really?
Testing a prototype.
Was it for a military base?
It was. Chrysler didn't get the contract, so
Okay.
then we ended up moving from Windsor to Greater Toronto area because Peter was employed by Ontario Hydro, which was a great choice. Stability. We were hoping for a family.
Pensions.
Everything, you name it. Really good benefits, which I still have as a retiree, a survivor of a retiree.
Yes.
So then we literally rented a place for 9 months. We wanted 6 months. The landlord wanted, because we wanted to buy something, wanted a year. We split it off at 9. We're in Port Credit. Every evening, we went out with a 30-mile radius of Kipling and QE and looked everywhere. We looked in Brampton, in Bramley, in Ajax, all over the place. Once we found Oakville. That was
What year was this when you were driving around?
So we were driving around in 71.
71, okay.
And we moved into our first house.
Very different town then than
Very
it is today.
much. Less
But
than
yes.
50,000.
What was the draw to it? What did you, when you drove into
Proximity, the driving distance. We had GO Train. It was limited, but we still had GO Train. We had some local transit.
it? So your husband,
because
he was a commuter?
he was a
commuted into
commuter
Toronto?
to
Okay.
Kipling and QE.
Yep.
So, but we just loved it. We loved the harbours. Once we'd seen the harbours, it was going to be somewhere on the lake. It was not going to be north.
Right.
But we just loved it. And we moved on to a street in the neighbourhood I still live in College Park. I'm in my fourth house, and my son and daughter-in-law and grandchildren live around the corner from me, so I am beyond blessed.
Yeah.
And everybody moved into that street, Odessa Crescent.
Odessa.
We were all pregnant with our first or subsequent children. It was amazing.
So were you the first owners of those houses? Did you buy from the builders? Yes. Okay.
First house owner of that house. Then we did resales.
Right.
We bought two more before Peter died. He actually died in a house that we owned in that area.
And you don't live far from Odessa today,
We
now,
do-
don't you?
no,
You just found a little bit more of a private court down the way there.
Exactly. I just, well, it's a bungalow.
Yeah.
So the story, you won't like this as a real estate agent, but literally, Peter had been dead for maybe 18 months, or maybe 2 or 3 years, actually, more years than that, but it doesn't matter. Academic. And the boys were graduating from Carleton University, and I'm trampling around to have the swimming pool, the 3-car garage. Well, what am I doing, right? And I wanted to make a move to age in place, and I'd sold a little townhouse that we had bought and rented, because that's where we thought we were going to end up in Bronte.
Right.
But I didn't want to move to Bronte, so I wanted to stay, and Robert had moved, so was showing interest in moving back to our neighbourhood. So literally a person knocked on my door and said, "Your neighbours think you might be ready to sell."
Is that right?
They bought my house.
Wow.
And they waited for 16 months.
It's
till
how I
could
started
find
my career.
whatever.
I door knocked all of Glen Abbey. I door knocked all of College Park to
It's the way to
introduce
do it.
myself. Yeah.
Well,
hard
in
to
the
do. Hard to do now because everyone thinks you're an Amazon delivery and no one answers the door. But back then you could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're living on Odessa. You're starting your family. You're in Oakville. What was your journey kind of leading into politics? Tell us that story.
Well, it was the 1978 Ontario Municipal Board hearing that had been appealed. So huge thing for a community that's growing to take their official plan and then people object to it. So it's taken to a hearing. Remember, we were less than 50,000 people. That hearing went on for 4 months, which was historic. The town, in actual fact, lost most of that hearing.
Okay.
Because their intention was to grow south to north, Midtown core, Trafalgar and Dundas, and not to have Glen Abbey and River Oaks in play, or
Joshua
Clearview,
Creek, yep.
until that had happened. So it was a massive thing. So in my neighbourhood, you get to it via 6 Line. And so you have the Oakville Golf Course, a lovely piece of Oakville, of open landscape that's still there, thankfully.
Yeah, I'm a member.
The neighbours are all up in arms because the owners are challenging the town's designation of public open space. And, under the law, you really can't make private property public,
Sure.
but the town did.
Right.
Anyway, there was a meeting somewhere. There used to be St. Simon's Anglican Church on the corner of Cullum and 6 Line. The neighbours got upset. We had a meeting at either White Oaks Library within the high school or in the church. And so I was elected as the College Park Residents Association. And I went, Paul Farley was a councillor. He had got into public life via the residents group, so he was very helpful. And I sat at the hearing. So neighbours took care of my boys who were preschool while I attended a hearing. And it was like an education in planning, in municipal law, because I sat and I learned. And I'm a bit of a sponge. So I learned a great deal.
Yeah.
And so I also, there was, at where now Oakville Place is, it was Towers and Food City. That's all that was there, with a little link that had a barber shop and things like that.
Okay.
Well, Cambridge Leasehold wanted to build Oakville Place. Town of Oakville did not want anything there. It was Carol Gooding was the only woman on council, so there was 12 councillors and a mayor, male-dominated. I went to the meeting, and they literally said, I think it was Carl Erickson from this area in Falkwood, who said, "We can't let this be built because while we're away earning the family income, our wives will be squandering the household money."
way.
They actually said that. And I am sitting, like I'd be 29, 30 or something. 29, I don't even think I was 30. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what the?
Is this
and
guy...
I mean, now it seems so bizarre, but it was actually said, and it was reinforced continually. So they denied Oakville Place.
Because they didn't want their wives to go shopping while they were at work.
Didn't want them to spend the money. I mean, forget the shopping. So it was the end result. And control. This was a 50s attitude to women. And in fact, when we went for our first mortgage, the bank manager, in my presence, said to my husband, well, you should probably take a little bit extra because, you know, your wife will want fancy curtains and furniture. And my husband went white, and I looked at the manager and said, how do you think we save the down payments? Like, smarten up.
Yeah. Different time. Just
it's
a
like
different
years
time.
later, I was buying a car. And I'd been out, and I knew more about the car than the salesperson, but he was very nice. He was a hybrid. He hadn't really been briefed. But they play that, you know, that stupid game they play when the salesman goes to see the sales manager, and the sales manager, I don't know if we can do that. That back and forth. And I thought, my husband used to hate that, and I certainly wasn't agreeing it. It was when the sales manager sort of patted me on the head and said, completely unaware of my knowledge of the car, well, have you chosen the color yet? I walked out and bought it from another dealer.
Yeah, I bet you did.
So this was the sort of thing. I went home. My husband had put the children to bed, had cared for the children, and he maintained there was steam coming out of my ears. And I said, I told him what had happened, and I said, something should be done. Somebody should do something. And I can see him putting down the Globe and Mail and saying, why not you? And, you know, that's a question I've asked people repeatedly, subsequently. Why not you? If you see an injustice, if you see a need that's not being met, if you see a good person running for elected office, whether party aligned or just municipal, which is the most critical politician, I would argue, because it impacts your day-to-day more substantially than the others, do something. I gave a speech at the 25th anniversary of a Civitan Club in the summer, and I said, thank you for saying yes. You saw that and supported your men in their Civitan Club, and you said, why can't we have a women's Civitan Club?
Right.
And you said yes. And then as people came to you and said, could you give us some money for this? Could you give us some money for this? You said yes. And you got off your duff, and you raised the money, and then you intelligently gave that money away to empower people.
Yeah.
So my life in a capsule is, I said yes, and I don't regret it.
So we're in the mid '80s here, and you're obviously you're kind of moving up in your political understanding and your career, and you run for mayor. And I believe the first time didn't go as planned.
Well, you got to remember, I ran in after the '78 hearing for council. I lost by 30 votes.
Right.
My youngest son, Robert, was probably 5 at the time. I lost by 30 votes. It was a 2-year term. I stayed engaged. I went to every council meeting. I carried on learning. I carried on building network. You know all about that with real estate. And then I came back and I was elected. Freddie Oliver and I were elected. It was a 3-year term.
What was it? What did you look at? I mean, you obviously the things were brewing inside of you from your experiences. But what did you see in Oakville? What did you want to do? What was your impact? What did you want to change?
Well, I think it is having an impact.
Okay.
It's not change for change's sake. It's saying, I know within every fiber of my body we can be better.
Okay.
We can be better. And remember, there was all these young couples. They all wanted the best for their children. They wanted the best for their neighborhood. When my eldest son went to kindergarten, my younger son and I could not get anywhere on Oakville Transit within that window. So I wanted to improve transit. I wanted to, we were library people. The only facility we had was White Oaks Library. My kids were there 2 or 3 mornings a week. I wanted to advance the library services. They were good, but you can always be better. And I could hear the people sharing their stories over backyard barbecues or, you know, a glass of wine or a cup of coffee in the morning. And I could see that potential, and I could see all the ingredients were there. We just needed to pull the pieces together, to take the strings, if you like, and weave the tapestry of Oakville's potential.
Coincidentally, and this morning I was talking to a friend who worked at the town of Oakville, and I said that I was going to be sitting down with you, and he said, "Oh, she was so great. She was the only mayor that came to our summer picnics for the town and talked to us like normal people." And me growing up and growing up in Oakville, remembering you as mayor, to me it seemed like you really represented the people. And I'm trying to understand what has changed in Oakville? Because it doesn't feel like we're being represented like we used to be.
Well, I have to be very careful because I never wanted to be the former mayor, especially when you've been defeated, who was a negative person. Basically, my entire life, my survival has been hinged on finding the positive. Everybody serves in the way that they think is best. I think most people come for the right reasons to public office, but many of them have it, if you'll accept the bleakness of this, beaten out of them. It's an exhausting job.
Yeah.
I did it with joy. I don't regret any of it. But the people, they took away the community committees. And then COVID added to that the distance. So I think there's a real disconnect. Joyce Savaline was regional chair, and she wanted to put in 311 so people would call rather than call directly to the mayor's office, and the mayor's secretary would handle. And there was another person as well, an executive assistant eventually, who would handle the calls of the constituents and get back to them. We've now layered it. You don't have that.
No.
We don't have the Waterfront Festival anymore. We don't have the Festival of Classics. There's all sorts of things. Again, remember the tapestry, taking the pieces that are there and weaving them.
The community.
We wove them into the expansion of the Y. We wove them into the community foundation that gives away millions of dollars every year now. We wove them into the Waterfront Festival. We wove them into the Festival of Classics. And that's not totally, that the loss of that momentum is not totally on our mayor and members of council. Some of it is we no longer have those agencies, if you will, that develop the people.
Even the Oakville Beaver.
Interact, exactly. The communications and things. So I hear people now and they say to me, oh, it's not like it was. And in part they say that because there's huge growth. And I remind them, when did you come? Well, you were the growth at that period.
Right.
I was the growth in 72.
Yep, College Park was a new neighborhood.
I have not sold my house. A lot of people, I'm 75, a lot of people at my stage of life would have downsized or moved to a retirement community of some definition, or gone away and died. And that's not happening. So our young people are having difficulties of getting into home ownership. The rental market has tanked because the government no longer is engaged in enough building of social housing. I mean, Chautauqua on 6 Line was opened when that was the first co-op in Oakville. We went into Toronto to see to learn from them. I went on a walking tour with the chief planner of Vancouver to learn how they were doing things.
Yep.
I believe sincerely, and I was out with Joyce Savaline at a wedding the other night, I believe sincerely Halton and Oakville used to punch above their weight. I don't think we punch above our weight anymore.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're making me think. Glen Abbey was designed with co-op housing and social housing available. River Oaks was designed. Did it stop in Joshua Creek? And then obviously north of Dundas, it's not.
The liability goes with the federal and provincial governments. They stopped the programs and they downloaded it. The feds there's a lot of blame to go around to all orders of government, let me tell you. The feds downloaded it onto the province without any assurance that the province would continue. They downloaded it to the regions. We have Halton Region Housing Authority, and they gave us inadequate replacement reserves. So they set us up to fail. And even in that context, Halton Region, and I believe the other regions, but I'm much more aware of Halton, did a reasonable job, given they were in handcuffs.
Yep.
It used to be when Otto Jelinek was our federal member and Frank Philbrook, we could go to them with a project and they would undercut the mortgage rate, so the numbers would work. Chartwell Baptist, a group from that church came to me once when I was the mayor and said, what do we need, Mayor Ann? Because we're here to help. We have energy, we have intellect, we have faith, and we have resources. Tell us what we need. And I said, we need social housing. Yep. They built the Kerr Street social housing that is opposite Kerr Street Ministries. But they built it in concert with the other orders of government. And the town would help, as did Mayor Burton and the town, with the Kerr Street Ministries building in terms of development charges and things of that. So we as a country, it's not just Oakville, we as a country have lost our synergy. It's entirely predictable what has happened.
Yeah.
Now, we've had other, the Middle East war, we've had COVID, we've had inflation and all of this. But we would have been better able to respond in a positive way, to still salvage things for people. Think of me, I was a foster kid. The fact I'm a turnaround kid, so is my brother. My sister replicated our family background, died of a massive cerebral hemorrhage at 47, having married an alcoholic drunk. And my father had critical injury stress from the Second World War that was completely untreated. He was terribly beaten as a kid and abused by an alcoholic father. He did better, but he was still an abuser. He abused my mother. I flew back once when she was in a coma at a moment's notice because she was supposed to die because he had knocked her down a flight of stairs. Now, it wouldn't be easy living with my mother with mental health, but not on. But my sister replicated that. My brother and I survived. Some of these people in social housing, if they realized their potential, they could make a significant contribution to solving the problems of our society. 2 young people who grew up in Margaret Drive subsidized housing got full bursaries to Appleby.
Wow.
We are wasting human potential daily by not having an integrated system that is serious. Jack Layton, who I knew, I served with him on the Association of Municipalities board. I was president of that organization twice. He and the NDP had a good housing policy. The Greens had a good housing policy that by far superior to the Conservatives or the Liberals. We need to be serious, and we need to use all the energy and vision and talent of the 3 orders of government,
right,
and the faith communities and the home builders. Talk to them. Stop this. And this is what we've done in Oakville. The developers are evil. The home builders are evil. Profit is evil. We're a capitalistic society. I always say to people when they say this to me or imply it, do you have a pension? Have you looked at what your pension money is invested in? I bet you've got some REITs. and they look, oh, really? I said, yes. You can't suck and blow on this. We are not a communist state. We are not a totalitarian state. We are a capitalist society. Warts and all. It's not perfect. But I believe if we become our brothers, sisters' keeper and understand they have talent. I remember speaking to Morden kids who were in an after-school program, a tutoring program, and the other elected officials had gone rabbiting on about how grateful they should be. And I stood up as the foster kid background and said, I am grateful you're here. One of you can study, and your potential could cure the cancer that made me a widow at 45. It could cure the same cancer that almost killed me at 48. Because I believe in you. And the difference of when you tell someone they're not useless. In Thanksgiving Sunday last year, I took in a homeless person. I found her walking around the harbour. I thought this isn't right. She was 42. It has not been a seamless journey. She's out on her own. She lived with me for 3 months. I and another friend benefacted her, gave her first and last month's rent, set up an emergency fund. She has potential. I'm not sure she really believes it, but she has potential. And she was sleeping rough on a bench quite close to St. Jude's Anglican Church.
Right. And obviously today, one of the hot issues is Midtown. And obviously there's a huge divide between residents associations and our current mayor and the town of Oakville, and obviously who kind of throw it up to say, well, it's law. It's not us. It's the provincial government. It's the federal government. They kind of throw it up the line. I'm wondering about your thoughts.
Well, Rob, before I give you my thoughts, I have to smile because this is the mayor who, when he defeated me in 2006, repeatedly, his stump speech was, as mayor of Oakville, the mayor should be able to do something about growth. And of course, I spoke to truth about the Planning Act and the power that the province had. So the trick is, how do you negotiate with them effectively? One of the first reports I read in 1977, unrelated to the OMB hearing, was about the GO train redevelopment. That's how long this has been going on.
40, 50 plus years. Yeah.
And again, by not saying yes, the opportunities that we lose, by not working collaboratively, the opportunities that we lose for the people. So we had a cabinet minister called Kevin Flynn in the Dalton McGuinty, Elizabeth Wynne administration. We had a mayor who was aligned with the Liberals. He'd endorsed them. Why did they not get the infrastructure dollars that we needed
throwing it out
to do it? Why did they not? That's a burden to me, because I would have done things differently then. So the reason there's this great divide between our residents groups is they are terrified what will happen to their ability to move around Oakville.
Trafalgar and Cornwall is already the busiest. Like, I just drove my kids down this morning. It took 45 minutes to go down Trafalgar.
I come down Trafalgar most days.
Yep.
So again, we're not perfect. We've missed that opportunity. I have a sense of grief about that. But how do we get from where we need to be? We know that more and more people will not be able to buy the single-family home on the 50-foot lot. It's not going to happen. It's not going to come back. And we have some social responsibilities and environmental and carbon footprint. So how do we do the built form? We are twinned with Nihagawa, Japan, in the Osaka prefecture.
Yep.
So I know and I've seen the developments around the trains centers. The train lines are prime real estate in Japan, and I presumably in China as well, but in Europe, because people can live, work without that car.
Right.
They just come down, they go. A friend drove us into Toronto yesterday for the theatre. I tell you, I never drive into Toronto. I have my Presto card, I take go. So what has to happen now is there has to be a really intense sharing of information, acknowledging that opportunities were missed and saying, where do we go from here? How do we get this back on track?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have this conflict, and what's going to happen is the province will pay the heavy because it is their belief that this is what you need to do there. But look at the number of restaurants on Cross Avenue and in the corner of Cross Avenue in Trafalgar who've gone out of business because by the time people get off that mass transit,
they're not stopping there.
No, because the
Get us out of here.
congestion is so bad.
Yep.
So it's a serious issue, and we have to look at it in a holistic 360-degree way. So there's not a magic penny here because what the only thing might be, well, we'll delay it until we get the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because the issue is the infrastructure.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we keep hearing from especially the residents associations is that they haven't shown the plans of the infrastructure. Usually, like when they came to the Glen Abbey golf course development, that company had to pay millions of dollars to have plans for environmental, for road work, but there's no infrastructure plan.
Well,
and I think that's what kind of the pullback for the residents are going, well, wait a minute, you want to do all this, but how are you supporting it?
I would argue the infrastructure plan is not just those who develop, it's also the provincial government. And to a degree, some compensation from the federal government. I'm an immigrant, I'm grateful, I'm indebted, this is the land of my choice, way over the land of my birth. Although I'm grateful for the history and being born in the first place. But the feds control how many immigrants and student visas and things. So I think, again, because we have this, to me, unfortunate tradition of having one party in power federally and one party in power provincially. And my son told me the other day we were discussing when elections were going to be called, and he said they won't have both the same. And I'm thinking, why not? Why not? I don't pick a party, give them a mandate, and hold them accountable. Yeah. And that's where the wheels fall off when we all just say, well, they're just self-serving, they're in there for the pension, or, they're in somebody's pocket. That's not useful. It's not helpful. Doesn't get them into a state that they want to work for you, with you. And that's what it is. I've always used the term, it was my privilege to serve. I served for 23 years, 18 of which were mayor, but it was a privilege. And it only worked because I was engaged with the people. Right. The Midtown, the people have not been engaged in the appropriate time frame, and the province has not been held accountable for the infrastructure of their plan. If you could find it on Google, you might be able to, Centre Region Plan from the mid-50s, you will see the province's plan was the waving out from downtown Toronto and to the north, to the south, to the west, to the east.
But all
not
on
to the south, because of the lake. But and that's exactly what's happened. Yep. But it hasn't happened without cost.
Right.
It hasn't happened without incident. So Midtown Core, missed opportunity. How do you recalibrate it? How do you get it back on track? The best solution I would have is that the province allows us not to do it until the infrastructure's in place,
right.
The money's committed,
don't start building and then do the infrastructure.
And the timeline is clear.
Yeah.
See, I'm fortunate because I can come down Trafalgar Road, get on the QE, and go across to Kerr Street, where my business is.
Right.
I don't have to go the rest of the way. I can avoid it. Yeah. But people are legitimately worried. How do I get my kid to the soccer practice? How do I get my sick person to the hospital?
How long is it going to take? What time do we have to leave? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the federal, provincial orders of government have to do a better job. Hazel McCallion and I were quite good friends, and we were mates. Actually, both of our husbands lost their driving license the same weekend, one from Alzheimer's and one from brain tumours. And so we were close together when I was the president of AMO, and she served on the board that I chaired for as well. And she would say that we've got to stop whining. We've got to be factual on what it is what we need and why. And I'll give you an example. Upper Middle Road Bridge was needed, because of the 78 hearing.
Viaduct,
the province decided we were going to grow west, not east, not north. I went down with my team, and the province was trying to give us 50 cents on the dollar to build that bridge. Well, that sounds to most mayors really good. And I said, absolutely not. We're not taking anything but 70%. And I said to my town manager, engineer, and there were 3 men who came with me, male at that point, department heads. We went to meet with the minister, and the minister laid it out with great joy because he thought we'd be very grateful and go away. And I just said, and I'd warned him I was going to do this, I folded up my portfolio and I pushed my chair back and I stood. And I said, Mr. Minister, the province is requiring us to grow. You have determined by an OMB that we're growing in a direction that we did not plan, and we will not accept 50-cent dollars. And I don't want to waste any more of your time or my time. I will not take this back to the people of Oakville. And I'd already primed my team to stand, and we left. And the minister's going, well, within a week, we had 70-cent dollars.
And I mean, talked about how are you spending your days now? What is a day in the life of Anne Mulvale now?
Well, I'm faith-based, so I do a devotional thing before I get my day organized. I'm a nana, and my grandchildren live close to me. I have a business interest on Kerr Street. We do a lot of outreach work with persons on journey with cancer. We also do regular hair and stuff. Hair loss is a big issue for women as they age, and we're into that, especially post-COVID or post-surgery or post-cancer. I still serve on the Waterfront Regeneration Trust with David Crombie and Pauline Browse, and David says with great affection, we're the oldest board. And I said, we're talking about our age here, or we're talking about the years we've had the privilege to serve? We do, a lot of work on First Urban National Park, and that was really Pauline's passion. So I was appointed by the province, just had my term renewed for Walkerton Clean Water Centre. So I used to chair planning and public works in my former municipal life. And I, as a Canadian, want, as I think all Canadians do, clean drinking water, particularly for our families and loved ones, but for the First Nations, whose lands we have savaged by some of the things we have done. So I'm very involved with my faith community. I still volunteer in a number of capacities. I mentor. A lot of people will come to me and say, and I'll do that freely. And if you're going to make money on it, I'll charge you. I have Advanced Enterprises.
Sure.
But I travel a great deal as well. So I was just at the theatre yesterday. I have season tickets. I like Stratford, and I like Mirvish, and I like Niagara-on-the-Lake. So I am blessed to have a full life. I entertain. I put on simple suppers, and we all trying to keep our grey matter going.
Sure.
And I do consciously work fairly hard at staying well.
Yeah.
So I'm very much into fitness and mental, spiritual, physiological well-being.
Let me ask you this. Looking back at your 18 years, I mean, as mayor, but additionally, your time in politics here, what are you most proud of?
I'm proud of driving improvements to public policy. We took seriously our opportunity, both within municipal council, regional and local, and in my role, and I was the president of the Association of Municipalities twice. So you make a lasting impact when you change the policy. The fact that the provincial government has a memorandum of understanding that I signed as the president of AMO, they have to consult with us before they make legislative changes that have financial impact to the municipal order of government. That has an incredible ripple effect. But I take just as much delight helping a man who lived not that far from me, who'd fallen on bad times, needed welfare, didn't feel he was treated well. I went to advocate for him, and he sent me a card a year later. I am now a year sober. I am now earning my own money, not off welfare, which is now Ontario Works, and paying my way and paying my taxes. So I never lost sight, even though I was interested in the big picture and the macro opportunities, I never lost sight of how important it was for that individual resident that I have the privilege of serving. And I followed the greatest servant leader example of all time. So I followed Jesus.
Yep.
And so to me, I was a servant leader. I didn't get it all right. I'm sure I ticked off a few people. A few people ticked off me. But overwhelmingly, I believe I was privileged to have the opportunity to make a positive contribution. And my life was blessed.
And this brings us to the part of the show. It's called the Robcast Rapid Ask, which is a mouthful. It's your last meal. You're by yourself. There's no one around you. What's on that plate?
Well, if I were well enough to eat, and I've been with people at the end of life enough to know that not everybody is.
It's more of like...
I would probably want a comfort food.
Yeah.
I think, my friends tell me, I make the best eggplant parmesan in the world.
Eggplant parmesan?
I make everything from scratch. I still make my own bread. I would like to light a candle, eat my eggplant parmesan with some of my homemade bread, and a decent glass of red wine.
Of course you would. I can picture it perfectly. She's so happy. She had to make it, but she's still...
Yeah, but remember... I don't see it as the end of my life. I see it with great joy and expectation.
Certainly.
That my life
It
continues.
wasn't so much the way you're death row. Like you're like that's kind of I started to take the death row because it was kind of more. Anyways, we got the point to that. Let me ask you this, Ed. If you were able to meet or have dinner with someone dead or alive, who would you want to sit across the table from to pick their brain?
I was asked that question before, and I said Jesus. But I had the privilege of being with Nelson. I never met Nelson Mandela, but I met Bishop Tutu. People who challenged the norms, made a difference, even when it was sacrificial to the well-being.
Yeah.
Mandela came out of captivity where he was denied intellectual stimulation, access to his family, and he changed South Africa.
Single-handedly.
He never gave up.
No.
He never gave up. And so people who said yes. Why did you say yes?
Yeah. I've lost my train of thought off of Nelson Mandela. I got one more question for you. If you could change one thing about Oakville today, what would that be?
I'd go back and get that infrastructure funding for the Midtown core. I would recreate all the community committees we used to have, which were a communication channel and a means to get people involved, and some of whom subsequently said yes to public office, and made a substantive change. I regret we did not get the infrastructure for Midtown, and I regret profoundly we no longer have those face-to-face community committees.
Well, Ann, this has been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate all the service that you've done for this town and that you're continuing to do. And please stay tuned for another episode of the Robcast.
The Robcast is brought to you by Oakville's own Fisher Private Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities and Fraser Associates of RBC Private Banking.